And welcome back to the TMCJ podcast. We are on segment 2, our media segment, and during the countdown, Blue was trying to make me laugh.
No, keep it. Okay, cool.
He also doesn't want me to repeat what he said to try and make me laugh.
I was not trying to make you laugh. I was trying to, I don't know, throw you off. Add some spice to that
and yet,
scene.
I held on to my professionalism.
You did, like a true gentleman.
That's
Faced
right.
by giant, you know what, no, I'm not gonna get there. Go on, right, you start.
Alright, so we actually did have movie night this week. In fact, we had movie night last night.
Just about, we just remembered it in the nick of time.
Right. Yeah, so this week it was my pick, and I selected the Boondock Saints, which is, as I was joking, probably the most Bawston movie that ever was made.
After about an hour of indecision, he came up with this.
It was a little bit more than that. And in the end, I ended up rolling a die to choose between two movies.
Yep.
I was either going to be Boondock Saints or American Gangster, which is also another very good movie, which is 2.5 hours long. But the Boondock Saints, it's kind of a classic in Massachusetts, mainly because it was a movie made about Boston.
Yeah. Well, not about Boston specifically.
Not Boston specifically, but just all the high shots of the city skyline. They kept walking around, like going to different landmarks, and
yeah, it was about Boston in the same way that Die Hard's about Christmas.
That's a good metaphor. But at least it's one of those kind of regional movies where I think everyone in this state has heard of it, and most people have seen it. And the closer you get to Boston proper, I think the more people who would just say it was in their top movies.
Well, how old is it? Because, I mean, it wasn't...
99.
99.
Yeah, it's
21
years old now.
Oof. Maybe people are going to start to forget it pretty soon then.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, it's still kind of a cult classic here, but the general, like, also just one last thing on this point before I start going into what the movie's actually about. We were looking up I was looking up what movies came out in 1999 because I felt like there was a lot of good movies that came out that year. And then I looked, and there were quite a few, but then I saw, for some reason, the Metacritic score, which is based on, all the, like an amalgam of all the critic ratings for a movie, and then the user review, or like the user on IMDb review of the movie, were very disparate. Like, people had given the movie like 7.8 stars out of 10, but the critics had given it like 44%. And I was like, okay, this is weird. So I clicked on it, and two critics gave it kind of like a middling review, like between 40 and 60%. One critic had given it 25%, and then one had given it 75%, and it was the Boston Globe, which it's a big newspaper around here. And I'm like, of course, the one that gives it the highest rating is the one from Boston. Anyway, but so the movie, if you don't know the plot, follows along these two brothers who are, I don't know, it's never really quite established if they're like first generation Irish immigrants or if they're actually like they were born in Ireland and came over here. But two Irish brothers living in South Boston who, through a contrived series of events, end up getting into a bar fight with some Russian mob people, who then come to take revenge on them, and they end up, having to kill the guys in self-defense in a very ridiculous and over-the-top fashion. At which point they sort of decide it's their calling to take out all the evil and corrupt gang people throughout the city. And the movie just follows along with them doing that in more and more ridiculous and over-the-top fashion.
Well, one trend that ran throughout the film is that what they would do is, the producer of the film, is they'd show you the end result of a battle, and then they'd go back and show you how it happened.
Yeah, and that's what I was kind of getting into there. Is the other plot line is they're following an FBI inspector, played by William Dafoe, I think his name is. He's the guy that played the Green Goblin in the original Spider-Man movies.
Yeah, Willem.
Willem, is it Willem?
I think it is. That's the way I've always heard it pronounced.
Yeah, is it Willem or William?
You keep talking.
Either way, it's last name's Dafoe. That guy.
Yeah, Willem. Willem.
Oh, Willem. Okay. Anyway, so he's the guy. He's an FBI investigator, and throughout the movie, like Blue was saying, what you'll see is that you'll see sort of the beginning to what's about to happen to the two brothers, and then it'll cut to the end result, and then this FBI investigator is like piecing together what's happened, and then they'll show you the actual, like, as he's talking about what happened, then they'll show you what the brothers actually did. And it's a really, I really like it because I find it really entertaining because you're right, you see the aftermath, and then it's like, how the hell did that happen? And then as it's revealed, you're kind of like, oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah. I don't know, I like my action films, but when they're kind of gangstery, mob kind of films, I kind of like them more realistic,
more grounded.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like, I don't know. It could have very easily gone one of two ways. It could have very easily gone into a comedy, or it could very easily have gone into an actual mob film.
Yeah.
And
it does kind of gyrate between the two.
Yeah, and it kind of offset me a bit. I'm sure it works for some people, but it was just kind of jarring because there was a serious scene followed up by a joke, and I'm like, I'm confused now. And
there's also, sorry, no. Finish your thought.
I was just gonna say, and the Willem Dafoe character really annoyed me in general.
Oh my god, yeah, I really like, but in the beginning though, like throughout most of the movie, he was good. But I agree with you that at the end he kind of gets, he's converted to their side a little bit too easily.
And
spoiler alert.
There's some things that he just knows, but it doesn't explain how he knows. And when they have just raided the guy's house, and the crazy person is waiting on the street for them, right?
Yeah.
In the flashback, like when it's overlaid, the detective in real time.
Yeah.
The detective in real time is firing a gun up in the air.
Yeah, that's where it starts to get ridiculous. First of all, doing that in a residential neighborhood, you're going to kill somebody because those bullets will eventually come back down.
Yeah. So I'm like, did that actually happen or not?
Yeah. Yeah, that's something that always has bothered me about that scene too. But
I interrupted you earlier from what you were going to say there.
Oh, I was just going to say there's quite a few. I was going to change over to there's quite a few memorable quotes from the movie. I find that you'll be able to, anyone who's seen the movie will probably know what you're talking about. One of them is that scene right before he fires the gun in the air, and he walks out front and he just throws his hands in the air and is like, "There was a firefight." There's that one. One of my favorite funny ones is like, you remember when they're like drinking really heavily and the gun goes off in the apartment and kills the pet?
Oh yeah, I was like, did that just happen? I didn't even see the cat like being there, so I wasn't sure what happened until they were like, oh my god.
Yeah, and then at the end, right before it fades to black, the one brother is just like, I can't believe that just fucking happened. Which I always find hilarious because it's exactly what the audience is thinking at that moment.
Yeah, I mean, everyone expects the people to die and they're fine with it, but when a pet dies, it's like,
Yeah, there's a lot of, yeah.
I know it's really Um, there was a rude thing that was said at one point by the detective when he's taking a phone call.
Yeah.
I don't know why it did make me crack up a little bit, but
Cuddle.
but it was so awkward. Like that scene was so awkward, and that line at the end just relinquished that awkwardness for me, at least. I think.
And I think that was kind of the
point of it, yeah.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, when it got to the end, the whole detective changing side shit and dressing up as a fucking transvestite and oh god.
Yeah, there's some weird choices near the end. I personally, having seen the movie quite a few times, I really, really like the first like half to 3/4 of the movie, but the end really does kind of start to lose me.
And right at the end, the way they actually do end it, I think is really bad, because they basically are common criminals.
Yeah, at that point, that's actually a good point to transition this conversation, because I think we've basically gone over plot points, things we liked and disliked throughout the movie itself, but the theme of the movie in general is kind of vigilantes, right? Being the only ones who can take down these big, corrupt, like evil people, essentially.
Yeah.
But the way it's kind of portrayed haphazardly at the beginning, it kind of seems a little bit more balanced. You see these people and they're kind of they're deciding things arbitrarily, but then you get to the ending, the part you're talking about, and it's like a public execution where they're pointing guns out at the audience and like telling them like that they've become morally self-righteous by the end, which I don't know. I can see where they were going with it, but it doesn't really feel.
It reminded me of the Dark Knight trilogy Part 3, where Bane has taken over the city and the courthouses are just like, I think they should die. Let's throw them out into the water and just let them die. That's exactly the feeling I got of them marching into a courthouse and just no, whatever you're saying or thinking or doing, no, it ends now. We're telling you that he's going to die.
Yeah, it's, and I said this last night, but I think that it potentially it's a message from its era, right? Because the end of the 90s, you saw a lot of movies like that. Both The Matrix and Fight Club also had similar themes, where not similar themes in the vein that they're talking about, like vigilantes and that kind of like mob justice sort of thing, but similar themes in that they kind of reflected a bland hopelessness, right? Like people like in the mid to late 90s, there was kind of this, I don't know, I guess this feeling that this like dry, bland corporate everything was, sucking the soul out of people, and all these evil people were just allowed to do whatever the hell they wanted because they had money and influence and stuff. And I feel like movies like this, in the same vein as movies like Fight Club, were just creative ways that were that kind of gave release to that kind of a feeling. I don't agree with it at all. No. Like I think if a movie like that came out today, it probably wouldn't hold up nearly as well.
Well, it's an interesting concept. It is one that's been played a couple of times now. I think, as we said, there was that we discussed about the similarities with that and Death Note.
Oh yeah,
which is a great anime.
Yeah, Death Note, by the way, people who haven't seen it, an anime where a high school student, college prep student, he wasn't in high school, manages to find this notebook from the afterlife, and basically, if he writes someone's name in it, they die. And he can write a cause of death and like time of death, and they'll die in the way that he writes it in the book. And he uses it to try and take out, criminals and people just en masse. And that anime is played a lot better. I think this is what you were talking about last night. It becomes like a battle of wits between this guy who's using vigilante justice to try and correct the world around him, and a detective who's trying to catch him and prevent him from killing anymore.
Yeah.
Whereas in this movie,
they give up.
yeah. In this movie, the detective just joins up with them, and they decide, you know what, vigilante justice all the way.
And equally disappointing ending in both of them.
Yeah.
Even though they have like opposite endings, because theoretically in Boondock Saints they get away with it. If it's going to be a quick ending, I think they shouldn't get away with it. If it's going to be a long ending, I would love if they did get away with it, because they've earned it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if there was more of a build-up to it.
Yeah, like Catch Me If You Can, for example.
Oh yeah, I really liked that movie.
It's a brilliant movie. It's quite a short and sharp end, and he does get caught, and he goes to prison. But then they're like, you're a really intelligent, smart guy. We'll let you out of prison if you work for us. And I think that is a brilliant ending.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's a true story, so I mean, it's even more brilliant. But no, I enjoyed the Boondock Saints, but it's not something that I could really sink my teeth into.
Yeah, and I think looking at it now, like, because it's been a few years since I watched it. I think the last time I watched it the whole way through was in college. And having watched it the whole way through again, there is a very jarring tone shift near the end. And I think this is what we were talking about earlier, where you said it's moving back and forth between, like, comedy action and, like, serious mob drama action. And there's a shift where, because everything up until that point, even when they're taking out like a room full of mobsters, or those guys get shot in the diner by Rocco, it's all played kind of silly, right? They're taking out all these horribly corrupt people and evading the police almost by sheer luck and coincidence, and there's funny bits to it because they're kind of incompetent in the ways that they do it a lot of the time, like the whole scene with the rope. But then at the end, when they're in the courthouse and when they're in the basement of the mob boss's house, like, it's suddenly very serious, and it's like they're no longer kind of goofy and fooling around and somehow lucking out of, being caught by the police and everything like that. Now it's like suddenly very, very serious and gritty, like the whole
they switch between
Dark Knight
badass and like childish innocence, which just is odd.
I think it was much better balanced in the beginning of the movie, but they kind of go over the top near the end.
Yeah, I was kind of trying to work out right at the beginning why they were allowed to just walk around in the middle of the church sermon, because they hadn't done anything up till that point.
I think it's kind of implied throughout the movie that family connections, right? Like, maybe because if that was, it's kind of implied that guy at the end was their dad, right?
No, well, I don't know. I did think that, but then I was like, but no, they can't. It can't have been their dad.
Why not?
I don't know. I feel like
I think that's what it was implying, because the whole reason he doesn't kill him is he hears them doing the family prayer, and then he completes it, and then like they're in their mid-20s, and they say that this guy has been locked up for 25 years, so they wouldn't really know what he looks like.
Oh, did they say that?
Yeah.
Well, they already fucking shot at him once.
Well, right, but exactly, they didn't know who he was, and he didn't know who they were, because they hadn't seen each other in more than 2 decades.
It could have helped if they, said something.
I think they kept it ambiguous on purpose. They didn't like spell it out. It was something you're supposed to piece together and go, oh.
Yeah, not. There are some things that works with, but I don't think that was. I don't know. It just felt. I don't know. Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I say it too much. Yeah. Any closing thoughts you have on the Boondocks?
Closing thoughts. Like I said, I really liked the first 3/4 of the movie. I find it thoroughly entertaining. But the moral of it is just something that I'm not really ever on board with. As much fun as it is to watch, Batman punch people or a mob boss to get shot in the face, it's not I think a moral philosophy I could ever
get behind,
be on board with. Yeah.
That's fine.
All right. Well, the only other thing I've been doing this week, I've been rewatching 2 shows. Just like I've kind of had them on in the background while I've been working, just to have some noise to fill the space while I'm doing fucking paperwork. One is Battlestar Galactica, the series from the early 2000s, and then the other one is a show that I think was on AMC that then got bought by Netflix, which was Hell on Wheels. Both of them excellent shows. Battlestar Galactica, it's a sci-fi show that's in a very different vein from sci-fi shows like Star Trek or Stargate, where they're kind of going places and these new characters and things are what really drives the plot. Whereas Battlestar Galactica, it's more like they're kind of it's a group of survivors stranded on like a small number of ships, like running from an enemy that's chasing them. And so the story becomes much more about inter-character drama, how each person is dealing with the situation, how they resolve different crises that are resulting from the situation that they're in, try to get by with the limited resources they have and still stay alive. I really, really like it because the character writing in it is just excellent. But it's not a sci-fi genre that appeals to anyone. Have you ever seen it or seen any of it?
That's like Lexicate. No, not really. I think it was kind of before my time, but
I personally never watched it until years after it had already finished.
all right.
It was, I think it ran from 2005 to 2010 maybe, or 2009. And I never watched it until, I want to say 2012 or 2013 for the first time. So it had already finished by the time I watched it. But, yeah, just really good series. I like that kind of character drama stuff, those stories of just... I also like the, stranded at an island kind of plot lines where it's the same group of people trapped in a situation, and the plot is just how do they deal with this situation and try to get out of it.
I see. Well, that's not the only thing that's finishing or finished. I suppose that's finished. It was a bad transition. Tomorrow, they are releasing the final season of Attack on Titan.
I have not watched that show since the first season.
Me neither. Actually, I've watched the first 2 seasons of it, I think.
I read the manga for a while.
I've never understood why people were so infatuated by it.
I see it as something that I could get into, but it just never hooked me. I think if I took the time and actually sat down and watched it, I would watch it the whole way through because the concept's interesting. People trapped, these giant monsters roaming the world that are vastly more powerful than them, and they have to use all these weird pieces of technology to try and just survive.
Maybe I've seen too many animes that are like that already. There's a zombie
That may be
one
why
that
I
feels
stopped
super
watching
similar to it. I can't remember what it's called though.
High School of the Dead.
Probably not.
Yeah, no, it's not that one.
It's somewhere like there's a young girl with like blade sandals or something.
Blade sandals.
Yeah, I can't.
I do not remember. I don't think I've ever seen that.
It's like a zombie thing. But anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, people were going crazy for the time. They were buying like special coats and backpacks with the logos on, and I swear half the people didn't know what they were buying. But yeah, it was
a fad. Like
it was a really bad anime for it to happen though. Like I can imagine a lot of other animes that happening with, but they don't. And so I was so confused why it happened with that one.
Yeah, I could say the same thing about Naruto.
Yeah, but Naruto's a kind of a timeless classic, really. I mean, it's been around for so long, and it's...
What, so people just, they like it through Stockholm Syndrome? They've moved on from that now. They've moved on to Naruto's kid, Boruto, which I thought was a joke, but it's actually his name.
Yeah, I've not heard anything. I haven't seen any of the movies or past the Akatsuki arc, really. Well, I've seen a bit past that because I've been playing the game, but...
Yeah, you've watched. You've watched the rest of it.
I believe there's a lot more to it, though. Same with One Piece. I kind of gave up eventually. I've watched so many hundreds of episodes of One Piece, and eventually I was just like, nope. It was stuck on a single arc for like 70+ episodes.
Yeah, that's an anime that's...
It's
still going, isn't it?
Yeah, it's still going.
There are other ones that go on for that long that I fully endorse watching. One of the ones I watched when I was in high school, and it's still going now, was an anime. In the US it was called Case Closed, and in Japan it was called Detective Conan. And it follows like this high school kid who is, well, he works as a consulting detective. They were going for like a very Sherlock Holmes vibe. And every episode was just, there's a murder or a crime or something committed, and he's solving it. But the twist is that he crosses people he shouldn't have crossed, and he gets poisoned. But the poison doesn't kill him. This is where the plot gets kind of weird. It shrinks him so he looks like a child again. And so the twist on the plot is that he has to find ways to solve these murders or crimes and
as a child
and get the information to the adults who just think he's a kid. It's probably, I mean, it's very clearly an anime that was... I want to say it was made for kids, but it really isn't, because there's some pretty brutal murders in some of the episodes.
Right.
Like, there's an episode where a guy gets decapitated by a piano wire on a roller coaster.
Okay, yeah.
Like there's some pretty brutal. Anyway, but I loved like watching it because I loved. They do a good job, just like in the Sherlock Holmes short stories, of dropping hints along the way, so that you can kind of solve it.
Yeah,
and figure it out yourself. Yeah, and they don't give anything away until the end, where there's a big plot reveal where somebody explains like, oh, this is how this happened, and this is how this happened, and this is how they did this clever murder or something like that. And I really loved watching. It's on like episode 800 and something now.
Yeah, there's a Sherlock Holmes, the one with Downey Jr. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, that was like, hey, what if Sherlock Holmes was an action hero?
No, not really. But
there's so many. Okay.
Lots of people hated that film, and I actually really quite enjoyed it because they did explain all of the like how all of the things that were portrayed as magic to everyone else in the story,
Yeah.
how it was actually done. So like the rain when someone stepped in from getting out of his carriage wasn't actually rain. It was like basically sprinkling some odorless flammable liquid onto the person, so that when he was in the room later, some guy just had to flick a fire match onto him and he'd like completely combust.
I enjoyed the movie too. I will say that, but in hindsight, it was very, because I've seen other shows that do a better job with Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's quite a few Sherlock Holmes out there now.
Yeah. God. Well. Okay, we're actually coming up on the end of segment 2. Do you want to any final thoughts? Anything to close us out?
What? Oh, okay, yeah, we better round up. What's been the key focus of this one?
I mean, we seem to be talking about anime quite a bit today, in general.
Yeah, that's because of the Naruto thing.
Naruto.
Oh, God, you gotta stop doing that. I heard that so many times last night.
I don't remember. Well, it was one of my friends in college did that. Like, I think it was Juan, just all the time. And so whenever I hear about the series, that line pops into my head.
It was just those like intense moments where characters like running away. In the background, I just hear Naruto. It was rather distracting. Okay, yeah, that's my final thought. Fuck you.
I'm sorry. It's just I can picture that. Something always amuses me about that when it's like a very tense or serious scene, and then some asshole just ruins it. Okay. Oh God. All right. This is going to be the end of segment 2. Thank you everyone for listening, and we will be back momentarily with segment 3.